Good morning and welcome to the January 20th Finance Committee. To start our agenda, we're going to begin with Krista Battaglia and Heather Falls from our purchasing department to talk about items 1.01 Fastenal, medical grade mass purchase ratification.
Good morning. As previously sent to you all about the beginning of the school year, we had put out a bid for medical grade masks, and that was awarded to Fastenal. As part of that agreement, they had requested that we sign an agreement with them stating that we understood that any of the medical grade masks that we purchased were not returnable. And in talking with them, we found out that that was going to be the case for any order that we placed. So in order to streamline that process, we worked with Fastenal to kind of modify that agreement for the entire year of 2020 so that it wasn't for every order that was placed, that it would cover any orders for the entire year. There's no minimum or maximum on that. They understand that it's as needed, but basically all of this agreement is saying is that we are agreeing that whatever we purchase from them is not returnable.
Any questions for Krista or Heather on this item? Okay. All right. We're going to move on to item 1.02, All World Languages and Cultures, Inc. And this is a new contract. This came before the board previously as a result of the RFQ. And this is really just coming back to you as there are some changes in terms and conditions. And really happy to open it up to any questions that you might have at this point. Okay, all right. Not hearing any. We are going to move on to facilities. I'm going to turn it over to Kyle Gurrell to talk about items 2.01 and 2.02.
All right, thank you. I've got just two quick items this month. The first item, as you can see, is a chiller plan service agreement. And this is something that we have done for a long period of time. In previous years, we have used specific equipment manufacturer to do planned maintenance on specific equipment that was theirs. And so in kind of stepping back and looking at best practices, we've gotten a number from Daikin who is willing to provide service to all of the equipment that we have. Will actually be more efficient, and we'll just consolidate our services. This is around the same amount of money that we have typically paid in the past. They come out 3 times a year and do the preventive maintenance required on that equipment and make any necessary repairs. So if there are no questions, I can move on to the next item. All right, thank you. On the bond budget update, there have not been a lot of significant changes since last month. The items of note really are just in the athletics project. If you'll remember, we approved the lighting and turf on the baseball softball complex, the middle school project. And so those are reflected on the in the middle school construction budget. So if you notice on the buildings line on the new middle school, we still have a 6.7 approximately $1 million balance. On the construction line, we anticipate after bidding and awarding the public improvements, the sewer and water line work, and road traffic signals, that will have approximately $5 million left in that budget. So I will open it up for questions if you have any. All right, thank you, Dr. Miller. That's all I have this month.
Thanks, Kyle. Okay, we're going to move on to our finance section, and we're going to start off with Sarah McMillan. She's going to give us an update on the cafeteria plan reinstatement, specifically due to COVID-19.
All right, very good. Thank you, Dr. Miller. Good morning, everybody. So on December 27th, the President signed into law the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. This law, really the intent was to provide a variety of economic relief due to the COVID pandemic. So this act addressed various employer tax credits, a second round of small business loans, and then really what impacts the district, there were optional changes employers could make to flexible spending accounts, which allows for carryover of unused balances from the 2020 plan year to the 2021 plan year. So if employees do not spend all of the money that they have put into their flexible spending accounts at the end of the plan year, then those funds are forfeited. So with this act, we are recommending that we update the district's cafeteria plan document to allow employees to carry over unused balances from the 2020 plan year to the 2021 plan year for dependent care flexible spending accounts. So many employees were unable to use all of their dependent care funds in 2020 due to the daycares being closed caused by the pandemic. So this will benefit employees by not losing those funds. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Sarah, I did have a question on this one. Can you remind me, help me remember, do we have a medical FSA for our employees?
Yes, we do.
And did we choose not to extend that same extension to the medical FSA? And if so, how come?
Sure. Yes, we did discuss this in great length, not only internally with CBIZ and then also with legal counsel. And we came to the conclusion not to allow medical FSA carryover. And Kathy, I'll give you some reasons why. We have health savings accounts, and it gets very complicated when you allow rollover for medical FSA. With HSAs, there's some complications there. If we were to allow medical FSA rollover, that has to be for all employees. So we cannot have some employees elect to roll over and some not elect to roll over because they chose a health savings account. So there are a lot of complications, and we even asked, well, if we roll over FSA and I use all of those rollover funds in March, can I start an HSA in April? And that answer is no. So an employee cannot have a rollover FSA and an HSA in the same plan year. And then there was such a short period of time, you know, the act wasn't signed till the end of December. Our
Right.
payroll runs, you know, we had to run that January 13th, and that started HSA contributions. So there was a little bit of a timing delay. And legal really did advise against any rollovers. They really have, even in the past. We could allow a rollover in our cafeteria plan document out of this act, but legal has advised us that just gets so complicated because of HSAs. If we didn't have health savings accounts, absolutely. So I don't know if that answered your question.
I just wonder, I think I would have two follow-up questions. So what is that balance? Do we know that balance that people are losing?
Right, I do have those numbers. And so in 2019, let's go back 1 year, the dollar value of funds that were forfeited for dependent care was over $10,073.17 that employees didn't request reimbursement for or just didn't have those expenses. For medical FSA, It was $10,924.03. So that was 2019. For 2000,
Sorry, I'm sorry, Sarah, I missed that amount. Can you tell me that amount one more time?
sure, 10,924.03. So that's the dollar value of funds that were forfeited for 2019. So
On the medical.
yes, on medical. So where we're sitting at right now, as of actually January 7th, keep in mind, employees have until March 31st to turn in receipts to get these funds back. So this balance is likely to go down. So for medical FSA, we're setting at $17,218. And dependent care, we're setting at $18,492.
Okay. Okay. And do we know, did other school districts decide to, so when you say that health savings account can't be in the same year, does that mean that if we had extended the medical FSA, employees wouldn't be able to have an HSA in 2021?
Correct. If they had a rollover FSA, so if they had funds left and we allowed that to roll over in 2021, employees that would have elected an HSA, they would not have been able to have that.
And how many employees do we have that have the HSA?
We have probably close to 1,900 employees that have health savings accounts.
Almost 50% of our employees have HSAs.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. Hey, thank you for walking me through that. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. We're going to move on to the next items on our finance agenda. So we're going to turn it over to our CFO, Steve Williams, to talk through items 3.02 through 3.04.
Good morning. In reference to 3.01, I'm sorry, 3.02, the tuition rates. Tuition rates are reviewed on an annual basis. Tuition calculations for the 21-22 school year has been completed using the audited final revenue and expenditures from 1920, the 1920 school year, and divided by the building grade level enrollments to make that calculation. Tuition recommended for the 21-22 school year are listed below. As you can see, they did not change much from the 2021 recommendation to the 21-22. And at this time, there are no students enrolled for 2021 that are on the paying the tuition situation right now. So as you can see, the amounts there, the 11.6, the 12.1, and the 11.8 are the recommended rates for the 21-22 school year. And we're doing it in January now versus in the fall like we just did this last year. Any questions on that?
Steve, I have a question, and this is just because I'm a new board member. How are our tuition rates calculated? What is that based on?
Okay, what we do is we take the expenditures, the revenue and expenditures from 1920, and the DESE has a spreadsheet that I load that all on, and then it simply takes the enrollment amounts from each of the grade levels. The K6 has an amount and it turns into a percentile. The 7-8 turns into a percentile, and then the 9-12 turns into a percentile. And then that spreadsheet calculates these amounts that we showed on this bottom of the report there. So it's a DESE report that we simply load the information for the expenditures divided by the number of kids in those particular grade levels, and then it tells us what the amount should be.
So Kathy, it's based on prior year, what the average expenditure per kid is.
And that's consistent across every school district in Missouri?
No, some districts do not set tuition and do not allow non-residents to attend. So my prior district, we did not set tuition rates because we would not accept out of district children unless it was a homeless situation or a hardship, which you do for free anyways.
But if they do, then if they do accept out of district students, then we all use the same spreadsheet that DESE provides.
It is probably the most defensible method because you're trying to charge exactly what it costs to educate the average kid at that level.
In
There
your
are districts that might set a flat rate, but this is by far the most defensible.
Okay. Hey, thanks. Appreciate that detail.
Great. Anything else for that one? All right. Transfer of funds then. Each month, we need to transfer the money from the general fund to the teachers fund to pay for those expenditures. This month, we need $4,018,276.81, and that's the normal routine and just a normal expenditure that we need to transfer over. Any questions on that? All right. Let's move down to the treasurer's report. And if we can click on the, that revenue and expenditure report, that'd be great. Thank you. And again, we know those are very small numbers, so I'll try to kind of guide through just in case anyone is listening that, well, I'd like to know the details. Just for some comments to start December report, we received about $11.5 million more in December tax revenues than we did last December of 2019. So that's a good thing. What we're basically waiting on now is, does January's kind of carry over and still maintain that? So we'll see what January's ends up being. As of right now, January of this year, the first 2 weeks, we received about $31 million so far this month, of the first 2 weeks. Last year, for the entire month of January, we received about $46 million. So hopefully the next 2 weeks will also come in and will be higher in January also. That will greatly help our cash flow, like we've been talking about the previous month. So that'll help if this continues. So we're waiting to see what January holds out, and that'll help us project out what the rest of the year kind of looks like for tax revenues. So basically, if we can kind of start on this report over to the left top part there under the revenues, for the fiscal year 21 actual revenue year to date, we have $66.7 million under the general operating. We have $42.5 million under the teacher special revenue fund, and that equals $109.2 million. That is up $68.7 million from the November report. So that's how much we received in December for the revenues in those two funds. That's a good thing. Compared to last year at this time, to get an idea, drop down a little line there to the current combined actual percentage. That combines the operating and the special fund together. This year we have 52.91% of the revenue budget. And last year at this time, that was 47.32% of the budget. So again, that $11 million we just received is a good thing and is giving us a head start compared to last year at this time. That is up 5.6% from last year. So that's a good thing. Moving over to the capital funds, if you'll kind of notice there, that is showing decreasing 9.5% in the comparisons from this year to last year. That is due to the MIC rent from UCM. Last year we received that in December, and this year we received it in January. So that is amount of $798,000, and that's why that percentile is showing less in December than compared to last year. So any questions on that part right there? Okay. So, and then if we compare them all to the total of all funds, the 95.3% compared to 47.98% last year. Again, that's not comparable due to our bond sale revenues included this year that we did not have bond sale funds last year. So that's the reason the total is significantly different there. Moving over to the restricted funds revenues on the right-hand side there. Again, all restricted funds revenue are still down considerably due to the COVID issue. Nutrition, activity, and the BASS programs simply don't have the revenues because the kids aren't there to do a normal routine. So that's why those programs are down in revenues. And then throwing down into the middle part of the report, the expenditures, again, if you'll focus on the fiscal year 21 actual expenditures year to date, we have $41.6 million in operating total year to date, $58 million in the special teacher fund. that equals $99.6 million. That is up $18.7 million from the November report. So month of December received 18.7, I'm sorry, didn't receive, we expenditured $18.7 million in expenditures. The current combined actual, dropping down just a line there, the combined actual of operating and special teacher fund, the percentile is 46.27% of the expenditure budget right now, comparing that to last year's 46.4. So we're down 0.14% from last year. That means we're right on track with the budget expenditures and percentage wise. So that shows where you're spending the budget the way we planned on right now. Going across, basically dropping over to the nutrition, activity, and BAS programs. Focus on those a little bit there. You'll notice they're slightly down again in expenditures, but again, they're not performing all the duties they have with the kids for there. The difference is the revenues are significantly down more than what our expenditures are down. So if we drop down even to the far right-hand corner where it says restricted funds and look at the actual current fund cash balances, you'll notice nutrition is negative about $1 million right now in cash balance, activity funds 1.8, and the BAS program is about $1.1 million negative in the cash balances right now. This month I added to the right-hand side of that in the orange there to kind of highlight a comparison of putting those all together so we can add that as a unit. And the bottom line right now, the difference restricted funds from fiscal year 21 versus the fiscal year 20 cash balance to date, we're down $4.4 million in those cash balances. And again, that's due to the program, the COVID situation hitting those hard. The reason we need to know that is basically in the past, those have been self-sustaining cash balancing programs. Since they're not, part of the auditing program is to include those in the general fund audit. So I included that basically. If you go over to the left-hand bottom corner to the report there, you'll see that $4.4 million in orange carried over. But let's start at the top there a little bit where it says fiscal year 21 current fund balances to date. That's the operating and teacher fund cash balance is currently $68.1 million basically. That is 31.62% of the budget. Compared to last year at this same time, we had $63.4 million. That was 30.58%. So our revenues are basically up right now, $4.7 million in cash of those two funds. That's up 1%. Again, that would be due to the additional tax revenues we received above what we just had last year at this time. So that's a good thing. But we really need to throw this $4.4 million in the calculation to know where we're at as a total picture. So when we subtract that off, we're down to $63.7 million. That would be 29.58% as a comparison that way. So right now, we're showing about $300,000 comparison to last year at this time when you include the BAS programs and activity and nutrition included in these cash balances. When those negatives roll over, that makes our net amount about $300,000. So, and last month at this time, remember I was telling you that same figure was about $10.1 million negative. So again, due to the tax revenues coming in more in December than we received the previous year, that's put us into a balance amount at this time. That's a good thing. That's really all I had to share on those crunched in numbers. Are there any questions that I might be able to address on that report?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. And I didn't ask them earlier because I thought maybe after today you could explain it so that it would answer my question, but I'm still kind of struggling with on the restricted funds. So my basic question, don't want to get too complicated, is that in my mind, the only two amounts that we have to cover with the operating fund are the two negative fund balances in nutrition and before and after school, which,
Correct.
that's probably a little over $2 million. Does that make
Correct.
sense?
You bet.
The activity has a positive balance right now. So I guess I'm wondering why we're subtracting the 4 million from the fund balance when really we're only having to cover out of operating funds the amount that nutrition and BAS is short. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
You bet. Totally does, Judy. Thank you very much. I agree with that. If we go at like at year end, if this maintains, then you're correct. I would totally recommend that we would move over from the general fund those amounts just to give us back to the zero amounts, correct? So just to bring them flush for the next year. The reason I was trying to show that in there is because you'll notice below that on fiscal year 20, the actual fund balances to date, that is, when you subtract that from where we're at right now as a total picture, that's where the $4 million comes in. So I just wanted to be clear that we've actually reduced our cash balances in those funds by the full $4.1 million, 4.4 almost, just to be totally transparent on the situation. I totally agree that if at year end we're in those same scenarios, we would not need to transfer the full 4 million back. But since they were cash balance neutral last year, I just thought it would be appropriate to show that as an audit situation, comparing that if an auditor came in today, I believe they would say you still have to account for that $4 million being negative as a part of the general fund situation. That's the reason I did that, just to show clarity on true picture as of year to date, where we're at with cash balances.
Okay.
Do not
Sure, I agree with that, but I understand what your rationale is. So,
okay.
Yep.
Would you like me to report that differently to make it a little
no,
more?
I just think it's confusing, and I'm just thinking in terms of some of the comments I've seen on social media about, the state of our finances. So I think I just want us to present it in a way that makes sense to people.
Okay.
And that's I think is confusing.
Okay.
And so I just am concerned about that. So that would, I don't know. I don't really know how you, because right now I think we ought to be presenting what our current status is right now. And so to me right now, the operating fund is only impacted by the two negative balances, because the other thing is, we've never utilized funds in activity to cover any shortfalls, which by presenting, by summing those together, that's what it looks like we're doing. And we've never presented it that way. So I think that also might raise some red flags for people. So I just want us to be, clear about what we're presenting. And
So
maybe I'm the only one that thinks that way. So I don't want to
Board Member Hedrick, would you like us to report that differently next month?
I would have to probably give that some thought because I wasn't really sure what we were trying to show by including, last year's fund balance. Yeah, I understand that shows where those balances, how much those are different from where they were last year. But in terms of what the impact is on our actual cash, that's where it gets, it gets a little more complicated and maybe not as straightforward.
Right. Yeah, I agree that we would not need to transfer the full $4.4 million to make that equalize at the year end. That is totally true.
Well, I just think that's confusing, and that, for somebody who's just looking at that, not knowing what that it represents, I think that could be, somebody would say, well, where's that coming from and why are they doing that and all those kinds of things. So I just want us to be clear on that.
So Dr. Hedrick, I think on that bottom left-hand corner, that's saying the current operating and the prior year operating is what you're used to seeing. He's just adding those extra two lines if we had to zero those out, because two of them are negative and one's lost $500,000. It's just adding another layer of information, but the same information they had years prior is still there. So you can still see that $68 million number compared to last year. I do want to add a caveat that we had received more local revenue in December than we had in prior years. And what we don't know is that, there's been a trend in Missouri for the last, I don't know, half dozen years. A lot of counties are distributing money at a higher rate in December than they are in January. It used to be the vast majority was in January, and slowly but surely December's getting bigger and bigger and January is getting smaller then. So we'll know more in February, and definitely know the whole picture by March as property taxes are paid and then counties give them out. So we are up right now compared to what you saw last month in those two lines. It'll be interesting to see what next month is. Is it just they're prepaying early for us or not?
You bet. And I would be glad to revise this to make it a little more understandable and less concerning with you. You're totally right. We don't need to transfer that full amount. But I did want to try to show that total picture overall for cash to cash, that is down on those amounts as a total picture. But if it causes concern above and beyond.
I understand that, but I just want to make sure it's clearly represented, and maybe someone else has, Kathy may have some other, thoughts about.
You bet. Well, I'm sure open to make it palatable and understandable to the public. Sure don't want to cause undue alarm either. Maybe the color orange is a bad thing. It draws more attention to it.
I think if it's a little different than maybe how we've done it in the past, having a notation might be helpful.
Okay. And yeah, you could say that's the only thing we had was what was in orange. And we talked about it last month, and that's where I was, verbally trying to share that information. And I said, well, if I add it to the side, then at least it's visually also part of the report that way too. But maybe the answer is to use the negative cash balances at this point in time in the orange section over there, and pull that over to the left-hand side at the bottom, and only pull in the negative amount, which would be the $258,000, to show what the actual cash liability might be on the general fund.
Well, again, I think that merits some conversation, because we have not typically in the past utilized any of those funds, any of their balances to support those other restricted funds. All of that. So I'm saying you would add the if that's 966, I'm having a little bit hard time seeing that number, 966,000 and the 1.1 million. Those are the two amounts that the operating fund would have to cover. So I think that would be the appropriate numbers to add to take off of the operating fund balance to compare your percentages. If that makes sense.
So Dr. Hedrick, so we could leave the right side of the restricted funds, what Steve has there, and then on the left side in the orange, just make that the 2 million.
Yeah, that's to make more sense to me. But I'm, again, I'm only speaking for myself.
You bet. That's true. That would be the transfer we would make at year end to make those utilized again. Totally agree with that. So that's an easy fix. If that's okay, we can sure make that adjustment. And that would show the liability side on the general fund transfer a little clearer. So thank you. I appreciate that. We can sure make that adjustment. All right. Anything else on that report that we could address? Good for now? Okay. Then if we flip over, Hannah, to the balance sheet side of it. Perfect. Thank you. Basically, this just shows, again, the cash balance details per fund. Starts off with the assets at the top, a little bit of liabilities in the middle there, the accounts payable and P-card payables. And then the bottom part to the left-hand side shows the cash fund balances. Starts off with the beginning fund balance as of 7/1/20 for each of the funds. It adds in the revenues year to date, It subtracts off the expenditures year to date for each fund. And then the only thing that's different it shows the transfer from the general fund to the special teachers fund that we do each month. And then that shows the amount of cash balance we have for each of the funds. Right now it shows the general fund combined with the teacher fund of $68 million. We subtract off the $5,278 for the liability adjustment, and that gives us a $68.0 million operating cash balance that does match the other report we just talked about with the fund balance over in the left-hand corner of the other report. And then you'll notice that the other cash balances are also shown for each of the funds year to date. And again, the nutrition and kids BASS program are showing again those balances being negative carried over just like they have been on the other report. So anyway, that's just the cash balances shown in detail for each of those funds. Any questions on that report?
Steve, I don't have questions on that report.
Okay.
I think I'd like a little bit of a go back because I do have a question on the nutrition services and the BASS.
Okay.
Do we know enough about the detail of the most recent CARES Act to know for our school district what that might mean financially?
The new money they're proposing, Kathy, I've not dug into that to see what those are going to be yet. I'm sorry, I don't have the details. What might be coming down. So they're still proposing that, right? I don't think there's quite for certainty what's coming down yet.
I think we're still waiting for information at this point.
Okay. Great.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, it would be great if we had a little more help on that side too. That would be true, Kathy.
Thanks.
Before we leave the revenue and expense report, would you like us to amend that sheet for the board meeting for tomorrow night and upload that based upon the changes we talked about?
I could sure do that real easy. Might as well if we're going to do that going forward.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. If you have time to do that, that'd be fine.
Sure.
I will send you something else after our meeting that I think needs to be changed on that report too.
Okay.
So I'll send you that.
Okay, thank you.
Judy, can you CC me on that as well?
Sure.
Thanks.
And it has to do with can you go back and pull that up? Okay. So I think if you look at on the expense under what the budget numbers are, I think the numbers that are there, the 123 and then the 91, I think those two need to be changed to be the actual expenditures for that fund, excluding transfers, because that's what's throwing those percentages off. The 33.6% and the 63 when you compare them to the past. Does that make sense? Because the actual expenditures, if you go back to look at what the board approved back in July or June, excuse me, on the preliminary budget, the expenditures in the general fund are like 80 million and the teachers fund are like 135 million. So when we're comparing the actuals, those are the numbers we should be using for this report, because at the end of the year, when the auditor does the budget check to see if we're in compliance, they're going to be using the 135 number in the teachers fund. Does that make sense? Because our actual expenditures are going to exceed the 91 million because we have, because part of that's being covered by transfer, but it's still an actual expenditure in the teacher fund. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
So revise the original budget amounts.
Yeah, it's just that those budget amounts include the transfers, which they really shouldn't. They should just be the expenses we will be incurring in those funds. Does that make sense?
Okay. Thank you for your help.
And that'll adjust those percentages to be more consistent with what they were the prior year, even though the total is pretty consistent, but those just look out of whack because of the fact that we've incorporated the transfer in there.
Gotcha.
Makes
Okay.
sense.
Yes, thank you for your help on that.
Just a minor detail. And I apologize for not getting that to you last month. I noticed it on last month's report and I just completely forgot about it.
Okay. Yes, those were carried over from the budget document that was approved in June, I believe. So yes.
Yeah, but when you're looking at that document, Steve, you need to use the number that's just the actual expenditures in that fund without the transfers. Does that
Okay.
make sense?
Okay. Thank you.
I'm glad to send you that document and show you where those numbers are if you would like for me to.
Yes, please. I appreciate seeing that.
Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it after, as soon as we're done.
Okay. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
All right. Are we ready for the investment report? Perfect. All right. If we can drop down to the bottom of that, Hannah, thank you. All right. All those numbers at the top roll down, and on the left-hand side there under investment cost, you'll see the $42.6 million. That's the total Payne Weber investments at this time. When we add the MOSIP investments of $89.8 million, that gives us a total of $132.4 million that are currently invested as of 12/31/20. That is up $67.9 million from last month due to our tax revenues coming in. So that's a good thing. When we compare it to the previous year at this time, we had $117 million invested at that time, and that's up $15.3 million from last year. So again, that extra tax revenues coming in has helped us out on the investment side also at this time. Then we also, as you know, we still have the $186.4 million for the restricted bond investment funds for the construction project. And then compared that to the grand total of $318.8 million in the total grand investments at this time. You'll see the interest rates up above, what we're getting on the Payne Weber accounts. The MOSIP account was the cash liquid account at that time was 0.04 in those accounts. Just so you know, in the January report, in the past, we've invested $60 million about in a 4 month out program. This year, we dropped that down to $40 million because of our concern for some cash flow issues that we had the previous month. We may not need that if these revenues keep coming in January, like we hope. So what we invested in January was $10 million at 0.10%, $10 million at 0.11%, and $10 million at 0.12%, and $10 million at 0.14%. Those are based on a 4 month, 5 month, 6 month, and 7 month outage for a term to get a better interest rate. So that'll come in and show on the January report, but I did want to let you know that we are trying to get a higher interest rate from what the liquid accounts are. Okay. Any questions on the investment report? Okay. I believe that concludes my side of it. Anything else moving on for the reports? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Any other questions before we end today? All right. Appreciate it. Have a